So who are you and what do you do?
Well, my name is Brad Pedersen. I am the co-founder of Pila and Lomi, which are clean tech innovation companies. I'm also the author of Startup Santa. And really, with my books and my businesses, I'm on a mission to really make positive impact, not only on people, but also the planet, and try and show people how they can live life to the full.
And we were introduced through another Canadian fellow mutual friend of ours, Renee Warren, who's married and partners with Dan Martell, who I've had on the show. And I think we've both been following each other for decades. So it's always nice to hear a name and me go, who is that? We should probably talk. So thanks for agreeing to do this, Brad.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I know Dan and Renee, they're just incredible people, have such a passion for life. And certainly when it comes to living your best version of self, I think both of them strive to do that in an extraordinary way.
So I'm reading a little bit about you, and we'll get into it because it's an interesting story. But I love it when I see stories like started working at 16, because that was me. I was that person too. I had it in me, I think, for different reasons. And usually when I speak to entrepreneurs who've had both failures and successes that have started at that age-ish, there's usually something there that's a little bit different than the average kid. Can you think back to that time and tell me what it was that was getting you in this headspace of, I got to start working. I'm 16 years old. It's enough sitting on the bench over here.
Yeah. This is the great question. Are entrepreneurs born or are they made? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Honestly, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I think it's both, but I certainly think there is natural tendencies to want to go and create something on your own. So, I wasn't supposed to be an entrepreneur. In fact, I was raised to be a chiropractor. And what I mean by that is that my father was a chiropractor. My father's father and mother were chiropractors. And my great grandfather was the very first chiropractor in Denmark. So ever since I was this high, pretty much everybody said, hey, you're going to grow up and be a chiropractor like your dad. And I just kind of assumed that that was going to be the case. And so everything I was doing was being groomed to go that direction. But at a very early age, I realized that I had tendencies that were, well, I would say it was a little subversive in the way I did things. I was kind of a troublemaker in school. I remember affectionately getting the strap at least 3 times before I got out of grade school. So, and that was an era where I think they still did that. But it was just,
yeah, you better be sure. Yeah. It's like, do they? I don't, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they do it anymore. But certainly I probably could have used it in light of my behavior. And I was a bit of a contrarian in the way that I wanted to do things. So I was that kid that was, trading things at school and finding ways, sort of hustles to make money. And at 16, I got this idea to start a business in woodcutting. And the inspiration was this. I lived on an acreage on my grandparents' farm. We had access to all kinds of trees on this sort of crown land that we backed onto. My dad had a chainsaw, a truck, gas, all the splitting materials. So I had all my cost of goods basically covered. I didn't have to go out and do any investment into any assets for the company. And all I needed to put into it was sweat equity. So I looked in the paper to see what the going rate was for a cord of wood, which is basically a truckload of wood. I underbid it by $5. So I think the going rate was $65, and I put it at $60. And of course, I just went and used all this equipment to do it. And at the end of the day, I ended up with a long list of customers who said, "Hey, this is great. This kid works hard. They want to support me." And I got so busy, I had to actually hire my friends from school. I'm paying them, $6, $7 an hour, whatever the going rate was at that time, which I guess gives you an indication of my age. And I used all that, the profits from that to fund all of my adventures, which at that time I was very adventurous, and getting out into the mountains and nature was certainly a high priority, still is to this day. But that's how I funded those kind of exploits.
And then somehow you manage your way through school? Do you not manage your way through school? You find yourself in the toy business?
Yeah, again, this is a not obvious direction for my life. I actually ended up going into pre-chiropractic, which basically, science diploma. The unexpected and unintentional grade of that is that I met my would-become wife So I was in school to be a chiropractor. I finished my science diploma. I met her. She had one more year to go on her degree. And she said, hey, I'm not willing to do a long distance relationship. So I decided to hang out for a year. And if you have somebody with entrepreneurial tendencies sitting around for a year, particularly I was doing like really crappy jobs at that time, things that would very much motivate you not to stay in that particular space. So I decided to say, I'm going to try something different. And I read an article in a magazine about a kid from California who invented a toy. It was kind of a rags to riches story. I was super inspired by it, ended up contacting that kid. And before long, I actually became his distributor in Canada. And so that was, my journey into starting to become a toy maker. And again, where I grew up in, the prairies of Canada, which is known for farming, agriculture, and oil. There was no indication that this is what you should do. Again, very contrarian to what you would expect to be doing in that part of the world. But I was curious. I was playful, and I decided to have the courage to actually lean in and try. And that started me on this path that I thought was going to be kind of a temporary side hustle that turned out to be an extraordinary career.
There's business acumen, and then there is business acumen. Where did the rigor of the business knowledge come from? Things like paying taxes and understanding how bank accounts work and that function, because one of the things I've discovered in my journey is you often have people who are chiropractors or other practicing medical professionals who actually don't get trained that well in how to run a business. Where did that come from? How did you develop to know I'm paying these people, I have to pay taxes, I got to file this, I got to do that? Where did all that come from?
Well, I'll tell you, my hero and the inspiration in my life has been my father. He was a chiropractor, and it's possible that he became a chiropractor because of the pressures of his lineage. But behind that, he was also a business owner. He owned businesses in town, and he was involved in a number of different network marketing businesses. And so he really set an example for me about being a lifelong learner. At a very early age, I just was inspired by the fact that he was incessantly always reading books, listening to audio tapes, going to various seminars and programs. And I saw that this is the way you need to grow through life, not just go through life. And as a result of that, at an early age, I got plugged into being a lifelong learner. And, I can also tell you that I have a PhD in DUMB. I have done it all the wrong way. I've certainly learned from the School of Hard Knocks how not to do it. But wherever I can, I have tried to learn from the wisdom of other people's mistakes. My father used to say to me, there's two different ways we can learn life. There's knowledge, which is learning from your own mistakes, as success tends to be a sucky teacher. We only really learn when we go through difficult things. Or wisdom is the other way to learn. And wisdom is where other people's mistakes come into play. So, I went into this naive. All I knew was that I had curiosity. I was courageous. And I was willing to take on challenges. I really believed that I could work harder and longer than most. That was just my sort of baked into my DNA and my ethos at an early age. And as a part of that, I just thirsted for growth and knowledge. And so I can remember, back in when I was 19 years old, I read Ray Kroc's book, Grinding It Out. And I can still remember highlighting out of that book and taking excerpts and writing it out and pasting it and putting it into plaques around my room. And I think that's kind of an extraordinary thing for a 19-year-old kid to do, except for I just really felt this deep desire to want to grow and learn. And so that's really where a lot of the business acumen come from initially. And then, of course, as you start to scale a business and it starts to become consequential, now you got to go and lean out into the world of others. And how can you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you in their area of expertise?
There seems to be a bit of a paradox here, though, because on one hand, you're talking about the strap in school and being problematic. And on the other hand, you're talking about this deep, intense desire for education. Very similar to me, my joking line, which I think I stole from someone and has somehow been attached to me on Twitter, is I never let school get in the way of my education, type of thing.
Right.
Yeah. My journey was very different, but have you thought about that? The fact that, wow, like I'm really having this challenge at school, but you actually have this insatiable thirst for education.
Yeah, it is an interesting paradox. I think it comes down to, I think most people who are diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, which certainly, even though I wasn't diagnosed with it, I self-diagnosed that, when they put together, this is the symptoms of that. I certainly had all of those. But the nice thing about that is that when you get really intentional or passionate about something or purposeful about something, you throw your agency and energy towards it. And at an early age, I was inspired to just be free, to make my own way, to rather than just go the traditional path of get a good education, get a good career, and then somehow that's going to put you into this path of success. I really just love the idea that I could go create something out of nothing, and with that passion and purpose, I think people with these what they call their dysfunctions, which I actually think are advantages, can get really purposeful and focused. And how can I use this adversity to my advantage? How can I take this challenge to help form my character and give me the necessary skills to be exceptional in this one thing?
I love, somebody had said recently that they call them dysfunctions or difficulties. And then somebody else said, actually, they're just differences. And I love that easy way to look at, these are learning differences. These are business differences, because if we didn't have these differences, there would be no you and I. We would all be very homogenous. It wouldn't be interesting or unique. That I think what makes entrepreneurs successful is not some type of difficulty or dysfunction. It's this difference. I remember seeing a documentary about Steve Jobs, and somebody said that he was basically the type of person that nobody could get along with. And that's what made him interesting. That was his difference. He was just somebody you couldn't get along with.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. I mean, I think our differences are there to serve us. I mean, I believe we were all created. I believe we all come with gifts that are unique. And there's a book I read several years ago called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And it's a fascinating journey because, you have people that are on their final days of life in palliative care, and this nurse notices some commonalities to what people are thinking and saying at that time. And the thing that blew me away is, of the 5 top regrets of the dying, 4 of the 5 were not for things that they did. It was for things they didn't do. The possibilities within them they never discovered. And that personally haunts me because I know that in life, I really want to make sure that when I get to the end, I want to make sure that I've worn out and not rusted out, that everything within me was discovered that's possible. And so our differences are, what happens is neutral. We can choose to let those differences become your anchor, or they can be your accelerator. And I believe that if you discover the gift in your differentness, it will actually be your accelerator to your full possibilities. But unfortunately, humans are motivated more by fear than they are by hope. So that, reptilian mindset that pulls us back and says, you're not enough, you're not good enough. You don't want to lean into that because of the fear of rejection or the fear of failing or whatever it might be, versus the hope of possibilities of what could become if I actually leaned into that difference and into that piece of me that is unique to me and ultimately is there to serve you.
I'm always fascinated with that idea of the unlived life. And I see that in friends and peers and family members. And then I can even self-reflect on the components that are missing from mine. And what I find interesting about that is, I think successful people surround themselves with successful people to a certain degree. Can you talk a little bit about what happens when you actually achieve these things, and then how you find new things and new energy? You've had such a diverse and interesting journey that I'm wondering, when you have success, at what point is it enough? At what point is it okay to say, I'm going to go back to just action adventure or hanging out in the mountains, versus putting myself through this punishment again, or doing this thing that I don't necessarily want to do? So I'm not looking for motivation from the angle of those who have never been motivated. I'm asking you, how do you help people level up when they've already had, or feel like they've achieved that, and maybe even feel like they haven't had an unlived life, like they've lived the life, they've done it, but they're still young?
Yeah, great question. Gosh, I think there's a whole lot to that. We could spend probably the entire episode just talking, unpacking, what is it about our humanity that makes us unique? And then why do we resist advancing? Why is it easy to become lazy and complacent? And I've spent a fair amount of time thinking about this because, just a little bit of my background. I was a toy maker. But most people say, "Oh, you founded this company that made Tonka and Connects and Lightbright and these other fascinating toys," and that's true. But before I got there, I went through bankruptcy 3 times. So I crashed and burned 3 companies along the way, and we don't tend to learn, as I said, from success. We learn from failing. We learn from the things that go wrong because it forces us to stop and reflect and think about what we've done. And I recognize now that there was kind of 3 opportunities that I could have landed on when I was going through those particular adversities. One, I could have been a victim. I could have chosen that, you know what, it happened. It happened to me. It was out of my control. There was events that happened. There was people who did things to me. There was, a number of things I could have pointed to. And that would have been me giving my power to the situation, the dynamic, right? And then I would have lost control. And that really just takes away your agency in terms of engagement life. The other person I could have become is the bystander. And the bystander gets wrapped on the knuckles enough times, you kind of go, oof, okay, I'm not going to be the victim, but I'm now not going to lean in too hard because leaning out and putting my nose out there actually gets it cut off. So I'm going to just choose to kind of limp through life and get it by and maybe create enough success so that I can, take a vacation annually and, just do nice things, but never actually truly seek out my whole potential. But what I've learned is that life really happens when you're living on the edge of your comfort zone. And that's where you're the champion. And the champion is being fully engaged in life and has a high level of satisfaction in the process. They're leaning into the possibilities. And it always happens on the edge of your comfort zone, pushing yourself outside of what you're comfortable doing. We resist it because that's why it's called the comfort zone. It's comfortable to be in the comfort zone. But where we find the greatest satisfaction in life is when you decide to get uncomfortable. Tim Grover has this great saying that says, get comfortable being uncomfortable or go find somewhere else to fail. And so part of that, to your opening point, is, well, how do you keep yourself there? How do you keep yourself at the front? And I really believe, and you've probably heard this before, that your average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I think associations are absolutely key to how you advance your life. And there's 2 different people in your life. There's either engines or there's anchors. And engines are people who help lift you up, who actually inspire you to be better. And, there's a fascinating insight from the 2012 Olympics in London, where Usain Bolt won the gold medal in the 100-meter dash. He smashed the Olympic record, right? The unsaid story is that the 2 runners who came in second and third also beat the previous world record. And when asked afterwards, I think Gatlin was asked the question, like, what happened? How was it that you beat this record that was obviously a record? And he said, we were just trying to keep up with Usain. So if you want to run faster, run with faster people. And if you mentioned Dan Martell, so we're neighbors. We live here. I was actually with him yesterday, spending some time together, and I love hanging with that guy because he inspires me to want to be my better version of self. In fact, next weekend we're running a race. Myself, my business partner, and him are going to run an ultra marathon in Squamish. Now, there's nothing about that I want to do. It sounds like a sufferfest. It's 50 kilometers. I think there's like 11,000 feet of climbing. I hate the whole idea of it. But I'm going to love how I feel at the end of it, knowing I pushed my possibilities and I explored another piece of myself that I never would have known. And it only comes from surrounding yourself with great people. So I'm very cautious about my inputs with both people. And I would also say just media in general. Like, I don't watch the news. People probably call me ignorant for that reason, but I kind of look at it that there's the world and there's my world. I can only control my world. And if I get caught up in all the distractions of the world, it just fogs my mind from being able to put any agency into the world I can control and where I can give my best to help build value in people and others.
What do you think is the merit or value of risk then? Because as we get older and as we have success in however we do, I would argue that it's somewhat easier to do the challenging things because the risk level is less. It's not like you're not going to pay the mortgage. It's not like the kids are going to go hungry. It's not like it's this or the street. Do you think that that changes people? I'm always fascinated with super successful people who take these tremendous risks or put themselves out there in ways in which I would typically stand back and say, you don't need this. I'm thinking even of the old Howard Stern bit when Donald Trump ran for presidency. And Stern was like, why would he do that? He doesn't need this. Like this, he does not need any of this headache. There is something unique there, I think, in terms of risk and also ego and this weird combination. Do you look at it like that at all?
Yeah. Look, it's sort of a pithy saying that you're either green and growing or ripe and rotting, but I don't believe in stasis. I think you need to continue to grow. And part of growth, again, you only grow when you're facing adversities. And actually, the bigger adversities, the bigger the opportunities. They kind of come together. So if you want to create big change, expect big adversities as part of your path. And I mean, certainly in our current venture with Lomi, where we're trying to create the largest waste management company without the trucks. I mean, we're taking on waste management. You may or may not know that those guys are mostly owned by the mafia, but it's kind of like we face incredible challenges, and that's part of the joy that's in the journey, is that we're pushing the possibilities that, you know, people have thought a certain way for so long, and we're trying to break that. And I think it was the Schopenhauer quote, you know, your idea will initially be, so I'm going to butcher it a bit, but your initial idea will be initially thought to be crazy. And then it's going to be vehemently opposed, pushed against. So this is the part we're going through right now. And then finally it's accepted as the gospel truth. And, you know, I think of people like Elon Musk, who 3 different times, and maybe some that we haven't even heard of, he has put it all out there to transform the way we do life as society. I mean, he's electrifying the world with a vision that, I mean, most shorted stock in history. So clearly people bet against him actually being able to do that. And now today, when you think of Tesla, it's synonymous with electric cars, and his infrastructure now becomes the standard that everybody else is starting to use. As we continue to push into space, his company tends to be the one that's doing most of the work, that's setting that up. So infrastructure for that. And again, it was crazy. It was unfathomable. And this is from a guy who could have just cashed out after PayPal, went to the hut on the beach and just said, I'm good. I did my part, but has something inside of him, which I believe is just a drive to explore the possibilities. This is that coming back to, you know, Jim Rohn said, you know, in life, you may not be able to do all you find out. Make sure you find out all you can do. And, you know, I would rather wear out than rust out by simply trying and pushing into it. And if you don't live in that champion place where you're totally engaged and you also have high contentment, you tend to fall back into the bystander place. And now as a bystander, the only way you can feel and engage in a meaningful way is through actually trying to do superficial things that I believe are not fulfilling.
I still think there are many people who wished he would have stopped with Twitter, but that's another conversation for another day.
Yeah.
I do want to, I tend to not like it when people talk about their businesses and their products and what they're doing. It's just the nature of who I am. But for the sake of this conversation, because I think there's a line of conversation that might be really interesting. For those who don't know what Lomi is, explain it.
Yeah. Maybe I'll explain how we got to Lomi first. Is that helpful?
Please.
Yeah. So I'm a co-founder of a company called Pila, and we made the world's first compostable biodegradable phone case. And that may not seem like an obvious thing to make, but just to bring it into perspective, there's over $110 billion worth of mobile phone accessories produced every year. 20 billion of them happen to be in phone cases, and phone cases are made out of really durable materials. And if you think about the lifespan of your phone, it's 2 to 3 years and you're trading up for a new phone, and the case you bought is no longer good for the next phone. So we said, this is a huge amount of waste. Let's lean into this problem as a starting point. And we became experts in biocomposites and materials, and we made this amazing product, and it is still an amazing product. The challenge we ran into is that not a lot of people had access to home composting infrastructure. So we knew that when they were trying to get an end of life for it, it just ended up going back to landfill, which something that's compostable, biodegradable landfill is not as bad as plastic, which lasts hundreds of thousands of years, but still not really the right outcome we're looking for. So we started sort of riffing on this problem, saying, how could we solve this? And we decided to take kind of a lesson from Elon's playbook of like, why can't we turn every home into a compostable infrastructure? Why can't we create machines that process compostable plastics and compostable products at the home level? And so that was the impetus for Lomi. And then as we started to peel back the layer, which happens in entrepreneurialism, you start peeling back going, oh, well, here's what else it covers. Well, all organic waste can go in there. So that's food waste as well as compostable packaging and products. And then we started to realize, well, wait a minute, food waste, 40% of what goes to landfill right now is made up of food waste. And when it goes to landfill, I mean, I was naive. I thought it goes to landfill, it breaks down. Well, it turns out because you put it in a plastic bag that then goes into a garbage truck and it goes to a landfill and then covered in soil, it breaks down anaerobically. And there's two really bad things that happen. Number one, it generates leachate, which is this sludge that gets down into the water system, which is not good for drinking water. So that's number one. But number two, and probably the worst, is that it produces methane. And methane is 80 times more potent than CO2 as it relates to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. So Lomi is the first smart waste device that will actually convert your own organic waste into a healthy, nutrient-rich soil supplement, which I use that purposefully because actually my entire yard is being fertilized with the Lomi output, taking something that was previously garbage and turning it into gold. And at the same time is a decarbonizing asset, which is super cool. So it literally is a scalable, democratic way to affect climate change. And we're super stoked to be leading the charge with it.
So now explain what it is, what it looks like, and is it in homes everywhere? Where's it at?
Yeah, so it is a kitchen countertop device. It's about this big. Don't have one here to point to. You basically, your food scraps that you would use from your meal prep for the day go into it. If you had a Pila case like I have, or compostable packaging, you put that into it. You add a pod, which is basically a probiotic. It has the bacteria that breaks down, helps break down the process. You hit a button and you come back in a few hours and it's basically dirt. It's soil that you can put right into your garden.
And available commercially. Where are we at with this?
Yeah, so we are currently selling it through our website, which is lomi.com. And we launched the product back in April 2021 via an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign. In the world of crowdfunding, I've done a few from my past life in toys. They're hard. It's a really full-time dedicated project. And, we thought if we could do 6 figures, that'd be amazing. 7 figures, that would be unbelievable. Well, we did over $8 million. And it became the largest clean tech crowdfunding campaign of all time. And since then, we have shipped just under 200,000 pieces direct to consumer. And we will be starting to ship it through retail and a number of other channels shortly. But it's really captured the imagination. I think it's the first time people have felt empowered with doing something for climate change. But also, it's not just about, that's the vitamin side of it, that yes, I actually can affect climate change in a positive way. But the painkiller side of it is that food waste is gross. It's messy. It brings ants and rats and raccoons if you live in areas of Eastern Canada or Eastern United States. So there's nothing about it that's delightful. And we take that disgusting situation and we turn it into something delightful, because what comes out is beautiful. It's smell free and it's something of incredible value.
I was going to say, if it's not rolling along, you could always try, Shark Tank or Dragon's Den. It sounds like and you feel like the perfect pitch person for that. So
my partner, Matt, he is the spokesperson and he's incredible at just telling the story. It's pretty amazing though, to see how we've been able to inspire people globally to be a part of this movement.
So the story does tie into this area of conversation that I'm so interested in, because I'm actually living it currently with my new business as well, which is you are essentially building a market-making product. This isn't something people are actively Googling or looking for. It's something that they have to reimagine almost to understand what it is. Talk a little bit about what that's like in a world where it's different than when you see a toy. People know what toys are. They know what a plane is. They know whatever it might be. This is something where you're doing market making. Market making businesses are really different than I'm doing something better, faster, cheaper, or different.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a bit about that diversity?
Yeah, no, that is a great question. So we call it category creation. We're creating a new category. Market making, I think we can say those are synonymous. And this is a problem that people don't know they have. Right. So you're trying to like, how do we educate people about this? First of all, green bins are not, they're not that ubiquitous. It's still pretty nascent through most of the developed world. And furthermore, the ones who do have them hate using them. So we are really educating people that this is why you need to add this into your habits. And it's expensive. It's hard. It's probably the hardest thing to do. It's much easier, as you said, to come into an existing place and like, let's create a better vacuum. Like, let's take Dyson, who, didn't have to explain vacuums. They just had to show how they could do it differently. They could add design and this sort of sexy appeal into making something that was, pretty mundane into something really cool. Here we have to just start from scratch. And, I would say that would be typically an opportunity that I would avoid, except for we're at a time in history when we can no longer avoid it. I think particularly in light of what's happened this past year, where we're seeing record temperatures around the world. I don't think, who would have thought Maui would have had wildfire? I mean, it seems crazy, but there is change that we just can't ignore. And for us, the opportunity to lean into the conversation. So kind of adding to like, how do you create a category? You have to have some kind of tailwind that drives it. And the tailwind for us that's creating awareness is just, I think people are no longer guessing, is climate change a thing that might be? Is it a theory? I think we're all pretty keenly aware that there is something happening. Change is upon us, and it feels somewhat helpless. And at the same time, I'm an optimist and I'm an abundance thinker. And I believe that every human has the ability to contribute into this conversation and contribute into the solution. I tell people that the greatest threat to our planet currently is not the war in the Ukraine. It actually isn't even climate change. The greatest threat is that people believe that someone else is going to solve their problems. We have to lean in and do something. And so for us, while the threat is real, and I realize that because I've exited the toy business and my partner Matt had an exit from his business, that's afforded us some luxury to be able to lean into this problem and not have the financial pressure that, oh my gosh, it's got to like happen today and we got to have like, positive EBITDAs all out of the gate. We are in investment mode to scale this opportunity, understanding that it's going to require some time to get people on board. And the way we've done it is just through mass marketing, through what my business partner is really good at. He's an incredibly gifted marketer at identifying the problem and taking people from where they are now to a better future through the introduction of this piece of technology. And, I guess the proof is in the pudding. Like I said, almost 200,000 units shipped into the market in 18 months. And what's happening on the other side of that? Well, people are having amazing experiences and we're having incredible ratings. And now word of mouth is kicking in. People are saying, you got to check this out. It becomes kind of a party trick. People come, we get emails and messages all the time of people who went to somebody's house who has a Lomi and they're like, my friend showed me this thing and it was magical. And that's one of the key words we hear, is the magic of transforming what was previously something gross into something that's really good.
It's amazing. You have a new book, Startup Santa.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, usually to write a book, it's a huge undertaking for most. There usually has to be, as we talk about in the book publishing world, you have to crack the spine of the book. Like, what is the thing that's going to bring people in? Was this just a culmination of you thinking back and reflecting on the lessons you've learned, and perhaps they might be a value add to others? And, or was this a book that was something missing in the market from you? The book that, we talk about writing as, you got to write the book you want to read type of thing. Was it both?
Yeah. Well, okay. So the impetus for the book. As I said in the beginning, I've been through some adversities in business. However, I've come to learn, that really when you have an adversity in business, it's really not that great adversity. My father used to say that if money can solve your problems, it's not really a problem.
Correct.
So I've been very fortunate that I've had great health and my family is amazing and I'm supported by an incredible community. So that part of it's good. But there was still this incredible kind of Forrest Gump-like storyline of being a kid from the prairies in Alberta, Canada, to building a world-class toy company. And so it started off as a memoir. I really just wanted to take the time to reflect on all these adventures that I'd been through, including, and actually most especially, the challenges and difficulties. And as I started to share some of the chapters out with people, they said, man, this is really important stuff. Like, people could really benefit from hearing these stories. So, this is that idea that you just said, instead of writing the book you want to write the book that people want to read. And I decided to come through kind of a unique framework of telling stories about toys. So, I'm a toy maker from the North, so I am the real Santa Claus. Literally almost for 30 years, I was, putting smiles on kids' face by coming up with really cool playthings and shipping them around the planet. Toys are incredible because we all remember as kids those nostalgic moments of favorite toys and our experiences with those toys. And play is really a part of our development. It's a part of how we're made. It's our God-given design that we actually problem solve and learn as we play. And so every chapter takes an iconic toy that you would have read about. It unpacks the history of that toy, where it came from, plus what it teaches us. Like, what is the point of that toy? What is the learnings come from it? And then I tell stories from my journey, typically from the mistakes I made, because, mastery is forged on the mountaintop of mistakes. And I have been to some very large mountains when it comes to business. And just teaches out what did I learn from that? Like, how do I connect those things together? And, it also just takes you through the arc of my journey through the toy business, as well as to where I am now, which is, how do I take what I've done and apply it in a way that makes a difference, not only for people, but also the planet, and really focusing on a triple bottom line with what we're doing with Pila and Lomi. So who it's beneficial for, honestly, it's really focused on founders. I think there's two types of founders. I would say one that's like a young founder who really wants to get the wisdom from my wounds. You're going to see my battle scars, which, by the way, I tell people scars are just proof that you were stronger than what tried to kill you. And I have a few scars from the various things that tried to take me out. And the second group would be entrepreneurs who've maybe been at it for a period of time and maybe feeling disillusioned and feeling a sense of hopelessness, that it hasn't really worked out the way they want. So in both cases, I think they're going to find there's a bunch of good information and value in being able to just inspire people to lean into the possibilities, to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to actually live your best and brightest version of self. And I'm just a firm believer that that's ultimately what God's called us to do.
Can we talk a little bit about the toy business?
Sure.
I'm a bit of a nerd. I'm a bit of a collectible person. I love toys. I always have loved toys to this day. I'm very happy walking the aisles. I love the packaging. I love branding. I love marketing. I love the way iconic brands have been reinvented for this generation. We're having this conversation, I think, at a really amazing moment in time. I spent 3 weeks out in California for family vacation as the Barbie movie came out. And I've seen a lot of movies come out in relation to toys or superheroes or characters, whether it's Transformers or G.I. Joe or Batman superheroes. This was something really unique and different. And I admit this without having seen the movie, but if you had said to me, they're doing a Barbie movie and here are the actors, I would have said, it's going to be kitschy, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. What I experienced in Los Angeles was a cultural movement. And sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's magic. I know you speak a lot about luck in the book, actually, as for success. Have you reflected on just this one iconic brand that has been so troubled, in particular over the past 2 decades, where people saw it as sexist? There was some discrimination issues because obviously the female body, obviously skin tone, color, gender. This was a brand that, I don't know if it was on the ropes, but it was really challenged over many years. And suddenly it's become this icon. of something totally different. Have you looked at all at this as a person who was in the business and thought, what is going on here?
Yeah, it's fascinating for sure. Mattel, first of all, iconic company,
But struggling financially forever.
Forever. Yeah. So I left the toy business in 2017. That was when I exited. And at that time, I would say, and by the way, we had a relationship with Mattel. I think we still do to this day in the company I left. And, Barbie is just one of those evergreen brands that has basically what they've been able to achieve with a brand like Barbie or Hot Wheels or Fisher Price is extraordinary, because building any kind of legacy in the toy business is really hard, right? Most things come and go. They're very fad driven. Once in a while, you get these type of products that just, they capture imagination for generations, and then they get propagated by that because, mom wants to have the same experience for their kid that they had growing up, right? So to your point, when I left the toy business, Barbie was in trouble. There was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of competitors. Bratz dolls had taken up a huge chunk of the aisles. There was some
American Girl.
Yeah, it was, and there was a lot of people predicting its demise. Not to mention that, sort of the unflattering history is that, the Ruth Handler, who created the Barbie doll, actually found the inspiration at a sex shop in Germany many, many years ago. Yeah. So that's where it came from. For a long time, it was considered unrealistic in terms of the way she showed up for young girls and what she was trying to promote. And here we are today, and now she's iconic and she's aspirational and inspiring the youth of today with an incredible reinvigoration. I just think it speaks to fads versus trends. And in the toy business, fads are really, really common. That's what you see more than anything. And a fad is something that's here for a minute and gone quickly. And this is, it actually becomes somewhat addictive when you're in the toy business. That you see things hit, they take off, you ride that, and then all of a sudden they drop off, and it's like, I got to find the next, next. But Barbie has been a long-term trend that has continued to evolve. And I think they had a point where they could have maybe run off the rails, but they really did an amazing job of reinvigorating the brand and bringing a more inclusive approach to how the brand should be represented in the marketplace. They just responded to the trends in time. I think the idea of, and I heard this recently, and I think it just is so true, that, there's optimism for the future that has to be grounded in a realism and nimbleness of what's going on today. And there are two sides of a barbell. Jim Collins calls this piece productive paranoia. I don't love the word paranoia because it means irrational fear. I think the idea, though, is really meaningful, that you're constantly saying, what is it that could take us out, and how do we have to adapt? How do we remain nimble to be able to adapt to this? But being optimistic about continuing to promote the future. So the thing I appreciate about the Mattel team through this entire sort of very difficult decade until this moment in time, because I know many of their executive team members, is that they've never lost their optimism that ultimately this brand had enduring value, and they just needed to have the nimbleness to continue to adapt it and continue to make sure that it was relative for today. Jim Collins also has this one: preserve the core, stimulate progress. So they never fell away from the core, but they stimulated the progress that made sense for today. And this movie just kind of is the crescendo that shows that possibility. And kudos to them. I'm very happy for many of my colleagues there who are really now, after many, many years of being under pressure, finally seeing an incredible uptick in the value they've created.
The other aspect of this is collectibles. It's hard to detach toys and consumerism from the collectible aspect. And if you look at some of the more successful businesses on the Mattel side, the other example would be Hot Wheels and what they did with treasure hunts and super treasure hunts, and creating this thing where, sure, you could bring your kid in for $1, get a Hot Wheel, but the parent was also searching for that treasure hunt and collecting it and trading and pushing it on. You could look at things like in the background, you'll see Funko Pops, where, again, vaulting them, giving them certain aspects, limited, doing drops, certain things like that. I always believe that if you could be a student of the toy business, there's a lot of amazing, successful ways to think about life. even if you're running a digital only business, I think the ways in which some of these toys have been developed from the collectible standpoint as well. Do you think about that? How do we make things have more scarcity, more limitations to give it that little bit of zhuzh?
Sure. Yeah. And I think every collectible, you go back in time, there's Pogs, there's been Beans, Spin Master with Bakugan, Hot Wheels, as you refer to, Shopkins.
Pokemon. I mean, it goes on and on. Yeah.
Pokemon. Right. And it is a scarcity piece. That's for sure. What's rare and valuable, and how can you drive to rare and valuable? In my career, we launched a brand called Mashems, and we created the squishy collectible category. And it was a huge phenom back at the beginning when squishy stuff was all of a sudden in vogue. And the key to making and driving all that was to have rarity. You would have like certain common characters and certain rare and then ultra rare characters. And, the best thing could ever happen for your product, quite frankly, is if it gets banned at school, because kids are, overstimulated
too busy with them. Yeah.
too busy with it. But those bans, it becomes news, and then kids are like, well, I guess I'm missing out. I got to get into this. Look, I think as you if you take pieces of that from the toy business and you now apply that into your business, and think about what is it that we have that we can focus on that's rare and valuable, and how can we, again, kind of using Jim Collins, preserve the core but stimulate progress with that rare and valuable piece of it. And I think that there's a number of brands that are doing some stuff that's really cool, like it's exclusive colors or exclusive look for a specific retailer, but there's playfulness and taking lessons from the toy business to apply into your business, I think, is a really refreshing idea and way to think about it. And quite frankly, cross-pollination is often what helps businesses become more vibrant and more, successful in the way they grow. If you think about it, so Steve Jobs, when he came back into Apple, and their first launch was the iMac, and that was when they brought color into computers, which up to that point were like gray boxes, right? That's what you got. And where did he get the color making technology? He went to the candy industry. Yeah, basically Jolly Ranchers is what inspired that into computers. So a kids industry helped make that more creative, and look what happened. It was, the beginning of just an incredible legacy that built the world's most valuable company. So I love that idea and think that the toy business is certainly a great place to go reference for things that are really inspiring for your brand.
Well, Brad, you and I are galloping right into what I think is one of my favorite conversations to have with people who are smart. And I definitely count you in that category because of your experience and just the conversation. But nostalgia, there's something really powerful about nostalgia, good and bad. And people would make the arguments either way. And I think the great book of nostalgia has yet to be written. The Jim Collins Good to Great book of nostalgia is there for the pickings. If you want to co-author something, we can talk about it offline. But it's hard for me to avoid that conversation and the power of it, because every single chapter of Startup Santa was triggering nostalgia one after the other, where even if you aren't connected to the actual toy that is the impetus for the chapter, it hits something. You could never have played Monopoly in your life, but you could pull anybody in the world aside and say, Monopoly, what does that do? And somebody will say, my family playing it during the Christmas break. Somebody will say, that's the game my brothers used to play when we went to it triggers for everybody, whether you were touching it or not, something. Was that a conscious decision for you with this book? What do you think about nostalgia? How do you integrate it into your work? Because even I would argue Lomi has this nostalgia feeling of it. To me, at least, it does.
Yeah. No, I think what is old is new. And it is a matter of just, particularly, so the toy company I was co-founding is a company called Basic Fun. And Basic Fun is known for nostalgia. We really focused on things like Fisher-Price Classics, Light Bright, Care Bears. These are things that nostalgically had success in the past, and you just need to reinvent them into the future. And certainly as I was writing this book, I wanted to pick brands and toys that would kind of elicit and conjure up that feeling that take you back in time, that you could actually remember playing Monopoly. And thinking about the your dad or your sisters and brothers, and how you were trying to take over the board, and some of the dynamics that were going on, and even some of the things you were eating while you're playing the game. You can just go back to that moment in time and really imagine that. And not only that, but then tease out some things that probably most people don't know about Monopoly. Like the initial Monopoly game was actually designed to teach people that capitalism is bad. Yeah. Free enterprise was not for the good. And it's like, whoa, really? How did that happen? So
I believe it was even a religious person who created the game.
She was basically trying to tell the story that landowners were abusive, and that ultimately the whole point of the game was to teach how we should be more sharing and caring. Which, by the way, I do not think is a separate way to live in a free enterprise world. But from her worldview, she was trying to say, hey, land ownership was oppressive, and I'm exposing it. And it's done exactly the opposite. It's shown people that, hey, if I own the board, then I actually have the most to gain from it.
Can you talk a bit about how brands maintain nostalgia but do create that newness? You've mentioned that Jim Collins quote a couple times, but the final chapter is on a company that's very near and dear to my heart, which is Lego. Not just because it's a brand that brings all that out, but because I've both admired what they've done with the licensing and how they reinvented it. I can respect the fact that this is a private company, which most people don't realize that it's a private company.
Yeah.
I also have a very close connection in that first cousin of mine, who's a very close friend who's been on the show, is their head of people. So there's the actual corporate side of it as well. There's something unique about an amazing business that can capture a lot of these emotional elements and still wind up being so powerful. I remember being a new parent and coming back to Lego and turning around to friends and saying, there is no greater toy. It's educational, you're building, it's creative, it's fun, it's improvisational, it's build it and collect it. There was no lever that I couldn't think of in relation to what that brand had holistically done, whether it happened by accident or by design. And I found it interesting that wound up being the company that brings it all together in Startup Santa.
Yeah, Lego is such a... So the final chapter is focused on Lego, and it's Leave a Lego Legacy. And I first want to start off by just pointing to you said it really well in terms of how you described it. It's privately owned. In today's marketplace, particularly around the founders, they talk about being unicorns, wanting to be a unicorn, which, in the marketplace is $1 billion in valuation. I would tell you the real unicorns are the companies who create legacy value, multi-generation legacy value. That is super rare and valuable. And when you look at Lego and the founder, Ole Christensen, and where he started, making wooden toys, and how that, by the way, his factory burned down twice, not once, but twice. Evolved into the brick, which initially didn't have the little connector at the bottom.
Just
and that
bricks.
was just bricks that stacked and fell over. And then he added that innovation, which he passed away, didn't even see that actually propagate out. But, build into what has become one of the, top 10 brands in the world.
Forget
go
toys,
around the planet. It's just a massive brand. And because it's a private company, nobody knows for sure, but it's purported that they are the largest toy company in the world based on the volumes they do. But of course, private, we don't know for sure.
They're also pretty public about acting public, even though they're private. It's a very interesting model.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think there is so much to learn there because they have definitely preserved the core, but stimulated progress. And I think, if you take a look at back in the early 2000s, they almost went bankrupt. Most people can't believe that almost happened. But if you think about what happened at that time, and I talk about it in the book, they started getting really distracted. Distractions often come disguised as opportunities. And they started to go down the path of, let's make action figures, let's do the theme parks, let's make a TV show. They had all these things that were pulling them in different directions. In a very short period of time, they took this company that was, iconic and was building legacy, and brought it to its knees. And they ended up bringing in Jorgen. Can't remember his last name, but it's a tough name to pronounce anyways, because my Nordic is not so good these days. But in any event, he came in, he was a McKinsey consultant, and he basically just he made recommendations as a McKinsey consultant. They decided to hire him as a CEO. He shed all of these distractions and focused in on the one thing that they're really good at, which was building blocks, and said, we're going to reinvigorate this business. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to go after really important partnerships with folks like Lucas and Warner Brothers with Harry Potter. And they completely turned that business around. It's really not much different than Steve Jobs when he went back to Apple, and he took, like, I had 300 products and he pared it down to just a handful, and talks about how they're more proud of the things they didn't do than the things they did, because they were willing to say no, and they were willing to focus their energy and their intentionality into a specific direction. And so as we fast forward to today, where Lego, you can't walk into a toy store without seeing a massive section with innovation ranging from licensing, but also bringing in new characters and having an extension for girls, and
art,
just continuing
flowers, and on and on. Yeah.
Yeah. They just have continued to, again, preserve the core. They are a building blocks company, but they're stimulating progress in meaningful ways to extend their influence of that brand. And I think there is no better example in the world of toys and in the world at large, quite frankly, than how Lego has built that business in a really meaningful and sustainable way.
Yeah, and they nailed the movies and TV stuff too, which was nice to see, because it's that could be the other tough one to climb over. Your dad played a huge influence in how you think and how you write and the things you say. And in reading through Startup Santa, one line, often there's many lines, but there was one line in particular that gave me that stand back, need to take a deep breath and reassess it. And it was this idea that you're either going to pay the price of discipline or the price of regret. Usually this is the type of line you'll hear from a sergeant commander training you in Navy SEAL buds. It's a tough one because it has many layers and it puts a lot of responsibility on the individual, which I don't think is bad. I just think it's a tough one. It's a tough one to think about. I think about saying that to a teenage kid, where they're at in their development and how well they can take that. Can you unpack that line and help people understand this idea that you're going to pay a price? It's either going to be the price of discipline or the price of regret.
Yeah. Look, I think my father, who was my hero and unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago with the COVID pandemic, he was such an incredible man in terms of just the way he lived his life, more than what he told me, but just how he lived it out. So he first and foremost inspired me by living in a way that was congruent with that. And yeah, at an early age, he taught me to work hard, taught me the value of discipline. And he said, look, in life, you're going to pay one of two prices: the price of discipline or the price of regret. The price of discipline is going to cost you something. It's going to weigh ounces, but the price of regret weighs tons and will crush you. And it kind of comes right back to the 5 regrets of the dying: getting to your deathbed, being in a place where you're no longer able to affect any agency, and regretting the things you didn't do versus the things you did. And I think Jeff Bezos also has this sort of philosophy that whenever he's going to make a really important decision, he stops and he fast forward to his 80-year-old self and saying, will I be glad I did, or I wish I hadn't? Right? And I think that's really helpful for framing, to fast forward to your, you in the future of your life, which isn't come like that. It is amazing how quick life goes by. It seems to go faster and faster as I get older.
For sure.
But I can just tell you that I am often challenged to want to lean into the side of like, well, I just want to be comfortable. I think it's just okay. I can coast. I've had some wins. I should just do that. And I think about that quote a lot. Do I want to pay the price of discipline or the price of regret?
I love it. Last question. Tell me the one thing that really made you think differently, changed your mind, gave you a new perspective.
So I think there's been many of these. I don't think there was just one thing, but if you can ask me that today, I would say John Gordon's book, the one truth, has been such an incredibly helpful book for me. It really has helped form the way I think about, why are we here? What are we supposed to do? And where are we going after this is all done? And he breaks it down into energy, and we're made up of atoms with intention. And when you start to think about it from the perspective of they're not random, there's actually intention and design, then there's something more that I need to just understand about myself and the universe and how I fit into it. And it's been a really, really powerful read for me.
That's great. Well, Brad, the new book is called Startup Santa. Let people know where they can find out more about the book, more about your life. If you're doing newsletters, podcasts, whatever it is, let us know.
Yeah, well, if you want to learn more about me, you can go to bradpedersen.com, and you spell Pedersen P-E-D as in Delta, E-R-S-E-N. It's not the obvious way to spell it. And there you can find various things that I'm up to, and also links to some free gifts in that. If you want to learn about the book, go to startupsantabook.com. So startupsantabook.com. And at the website, we've actually got some video courses that we're going to be uploading, some bonus gifts, and some summary pieces from the book. So, and I actually think we're also for your listeners, we're going to put up a special code for Lomi. So if people are interested in Lomi, we'll be giving them some sort of a code that gives them a discount if they decide they want to join the movement and help save the planet.
That's great. Brad, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Mitch. It's been my pleasure.